Thanks for having me back, Brittany.
I want you to break down the latest conflict in the Middle East for us. It's an unfolding crisis that has been in the making for over a decade. There's been a civil war in Syria. It's once again claimed international attention after a rebel group took control of Aleppo, one of the largest cities in the country. Can you talk about the events that led us to here now?
Absolutely. I mean, as you note, this is a conflict. This is something that's been in the mix for over a decade. It, of course, began with the outbreak of Syria's civil war in 2011. There was over a decade of violence, conflict. The war has been essentially frozen in place for the last 5 years, with rebels that receive a certain degree of support from Turkey, controlling parts of Syria's northwest. There's also a large enclave in Syria's northeast that's controlled by the Kurdish forces that are backed by the United States. And this was and then, of course, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad controlling most of the country from the capital of Damascus, with considerable support from Iran and Russia. This was the status quo as of 8 days ago. It's now drastically changed. Late last week, rebels based out of the city of Idlib launched a surprise shock offensive, capturing the city of Aleppo, as you note, one of Syria's largest cities, as well as a large chunk of territory in the country's northwest. The most surprising thing about this event is the essential collapse in the Syrian army. The forces of Bashar al-Assad essentially disintegrated, evaporated. There was no opposition to the rebel advance, which allowed them to take a huge chunk of territory in a relatively short time. What we're seeing right now is the continuing of the conflict. The rebels are continuing to advance, reaching other cities within Syria. Regional actors such as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, and Iraq have all become involved to try to keep a lid on the conflict and control the spread of violence outside of Syria so that it doesn't spread instability elsewhere. But this is a moving story, and we'll probably know even more about it later today.
A moving story, surprise shock offensive, and as you noted, the army did collapse in days. So what led this to happen? What led this to be such a surprise? Because for the past year, when you and I have been talking about the Middle East, Syria has not even been a topic of conversation here.
Indeed. I mean, the war in Syria has been frozen in place. You've had Assad in Damascus with Iran and Russia supporting him. You've had Turkey maintaining a presence in the north of the country and giving a certain amount of support to rebel groups based in Idlib. And then you have the Kurds in the east. And this was essentially the status quo. What changed very suddenly, stemming from this rebel offensive, pressure that Turkey is placing on Syria. The president of Turkey, Erdogan, wants to reach a deal with Assad so that refugees can be moved from Turkey back into Syria. He likely is giving at least tacit support to these rebels to try to put additional pressure on Assad to reach some kind of deal. So Turkey is a major player in this, but so is Iran. Iran has been stretched thin in the last 6 months. There, of course, has been Israel's war against Hezbollah, Iran's most important ally, which has devastated the group, leading to a ceasefire last week. Iran is now attempting to resupply Hezbollah, and now suddenly it has to devote more resources to shoring up its ally Bashar al-Assad in Syria, even as it considers, the possibility of additional attacks by Israel and perhaps even the United States with the arrival of President Trump in January. So this places even more pressure on Iran. And my guess is that the rebels in Idlib sensed a moment of opportunity. They sensed that Assad was likely weaker than he appeared. They were given a certain amount of support, although not open support from Turkey, and the obvious distraction that Iran faced in Lebanon, as well as Russia. Russia has to devote more assets and resources to Ukraine and can't do as much as it could in the past to support Assad. This created the situation, the circumstances for this surprising and successful rebel offensive.
Can you talk about who exactly this Syrian rebel group is that was able to overtake the army so quickly?
Absolutely. So they're known as HTS. They've been operating out of Idlib for over a decade. They were originally an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization. They have since morphed into a slightly different organization. They've been running parts of Idlib for years. They have institutions that they've constructed. They have an army that they've worked hard to professionalize, to organize, to train. They've been preparing for this offensive for months. And they have taken over large portions of Aleppo province and are ostensibly setting up a new government there. They claim to seek the overthrow of Assad, to seek the construction of a new government in Syria. They're working with other factions, other rebel groups that are also moving against Assad's position. They receive a certain amount of support from Turkey, but not open support. Turkey is happy to let the rebels put pressure on Assad and create something of a buffer zone along Turkey's southern border with Syria. The group, it's unclear if it has the resources to hold on to the territory that it's taken. Should Iran and Russia decide to really step in and back Assad, it's possible that a Syrian counterattack may push the rebels back. Right now, it looks like they've succeeded a little more than they anticipated, and it will be a challenge for them to hold on to their current position.